Okay guys, today we are going to put in a zipper to our seam. So I've got a 7-inch nylon zipper, and you can check the measurement of your zipper if you actually measure from the top of the zipper opening to where the zipper stops. That is 7 inches. The whole thing with the zipper tape is about 8¼ goes a little bit above and a little bit beyond, but 7 inches is what we need. Nylon zipper, which means it doesn't have metal teeth. It's really nice and lightweight, really easy to sew over, a good one to start on. And we're going to also have muslin prepped. So I've got 2 pieces that are 4½ inches wide by 10 inches long, just like we have been doing, so that when I sew them together at a 1/2 inch, I'm going to get my 8 by 10 sample piece, which will go with all the others. So I've got 2 of those. I've also got a zipper foot, which is going to make my life a little bit easier. You can do this with your regular foot, but definitely the zipper foot allows you to get your needle very, very close to the zipper teeth without it being an issue. You can see it like glides right along there, as opposed to the regular presser foot, which kind of has to go over top a little bit of the teeth, and it can be a little bit more difficult. So if you can get one of these for your machine, maybe it came with it, that would be really great. It'll just be a little bit easier for you to get close and to be neat. So first thing that we're going to do is sew a seam. Right? So if we had a zipper in something, usually, unless it's like a jacket where the zipper opens, the zipper doesn't go all the way down, right? The zipper would be here, and say this was a skirt, then it would stop, and then the rest of the seam of the skirt would go down. So that's what we're going to do, is sew the seam that we are placing this zipper into. And so I've you can see how I've done this. I've actually put the top of the zipper tape at the top of my muslin. That's how we're going to set this up, right? So it starts, about a 1/2 inch down. That's perfect. And then imagine this is how you would mark it. I would come all the way down, really nice and straight, and I would see how much room before I get to the zipper stop. And so I can take my ruler and measure that. So exactly at the zipper stop is a little about 2½ inches, right? You can kind of see I'm hitting this big piece of metal, which is where the zipper, it's like a staple, which is where the zipper would stop. What I actually want to do, and you'll see this done different ways, and there's lots of different ways to do it, but I think so that we don't even accidentally run into the zipper stop, which we can't sew over because it's a big piece of metal. We can sew over the nylon teeth, we can't sew over this, and we don't want to get close to it because it might break our needle if we attempt to sew over it. So I say we come 3 inches up from the edge, because look, that'll clear our zipper stop by a full 1/2 inch. So we can kind of get rid of that, but go ahead and mark, see how I'm holding that to the edge, 3 inches up, right? And you can get a pin or a pencil to mark that spot. So now what I'm going to want to do is sew my 1/2 inch seam from this edge until I hit that pin, okay? So I'm not going to sew all the way down as I normally do. I am just going to sew from here to here, okay? And my machine is all set up and ready to go. I've still got the regular, let me turn this off so you can see, still got the regular presser foot on there. I'm not using the zipper foot quite yet, because right now I'm just doing a regular 1/2 inch seam. So I can go ahead and do it from this side so that I can hold it against the 1/2 inch marking, and I'll go ahead and sew a 1/2 inch from the bottom just till I hit that pin, okay? So let me set this up. I'm going to put it about a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch, in there from the edge. Presser foot down. I'm holding on to my threads. Go ahead and put my needle down. Walk those first few stitches, and then I can go ahead and sew the rest of the seam. I'm going to stop right when I get to that pin. I can lift up my presser foot and make sure I think I got right to it. So actually I'll go ahead and keep that up. Take my pin out, walk that last stitch out, pull, and there we go. Just going to work out my gathering that's happened, and now you can see my stitch only goes for 3 inches, okay? So if I was to open this up, it looks like this. I've got my seam down at the bottom, but then the rest is open, okay? So what we're gonna do now, I can leave this kind of tail on the end. I can trim it about 2 inches off, but here, I don't want this to unravel, okay, while I'm sewing. I want it to kind of stay in place. So what I can do is tie this off. Again, I'm not usually in the habit of back stitching, which would lock this in place. If I was doing this in a real garment, I might back stitch right there because I'd be really sure that I want to leave it in place. But again, because this is a sample, I want us to be able to see what we did really easily, and you might have to rip it out if something goes wrong. Let's not back tack it. Let's make our life easy. So what I can do is just pull. See, I pull on this, and look, I have the loop that starts to come through from the other side. I can take my fingers and pull this through. I can also use a pin and pull this through. And now I have both threads on one side. Look, this side ends nice and neat. I have both threads on one side. So what I can do is just tie this off in a little knot, a double knot, so that it will not unravel as we're sewing, and then I'll trim it pretty close, about 1/4 inch of little tails there. Okay, so now I've got that locked in place. So the next thing I'm going to do is prep this to put my zipper in. So what I want to do is press the seam open, just like I normally would, right? So imagine I could do it with my fingers here. I'm just going to press the seam open, but what I'm also going to do is press the rest of this a 1/2 inch open. If you need to mark it, you can. You can take a pencil and actually draw your 1/2 inch line that connects to this 1/2 inch line so that you can see exactly where to turn it. Usually I just kind of start pressing from this side and eyeball it, but we're going to press that open. So let me come over here to my iron and see if I can show you what I mean. So again, I'm going to kind of finger press this at first to press that bottom seam that's actually sewn together open, but then I'll press all the way up to get a full 1/2 inch pressed. Okay, so I'm starting from the bottom. Again, definitely go ahead and mark it so you get it accurate if you need to. And really press. And then what's going to happen is it looks like this. See how it's pressed? And it's actually pressed all the way down, but I've got a nice clean opening. And you can see here, it's just pressed to the inside, right? But now I'm not going to have any fray. This is going to be my outside, right? Where my zipper, you know, will live right under here, but it looks really nice and neat. And it's, the really important thing is there's a smooth continuation from the opening into that seam, right? So that's what's going on. So once you've got that all pressed, we can set up the zipper in the seam. Okay, so I've got this pressed nice and neat, and what happens is the zipper in this application, which is a centered zipper, it lives right underneath there, right? So this is how I set it up. I literally put it right on top of the zipper, and what I'm aiming for is that my zipper teeth are dead center in that opening, okay? So usually I'll kind of start with one side. Again, you're going to bring the top of your zipper tape all the way up to the top of your muslin sample, okay? So as you can see, the actual zipper pull starts about a 1/2 inch down. And then again, I kind of place that underneath, and what I'm also looking for is that all the way down here, the very center is on top of the teeth. So I kind of loosely place that, and what I'll start doing is taking pins and then pinning it in place and double checking, you know, that it's not moving. So I've got a pin to start there, and I'm just going to follow it down. I might do one side at first, I might do both, but I'm going to make sure that my zipper teeth are dead center as I go. And notice how I'm putting the pins in. I'm pushing down into the table and then pushing back up so I don't have to pick up what I'm doing. See, I just push down like that, and then I can push with my finger so I can get it back up. So that side is really nicely pinned in, and what I'm hoping to do is to have these two pieces of the muslin kiss, to have them meet as though the seam is sewn just like it is down here, right? So that even after I have this zipper in place, you won't be able to tell that it's there, or, you know, not much is the goal, that these seams will be kissing. It won't be open. We won't have an exposed zipper. Sometimes that's a specific feature that you see the zipper teeth. We're not doing that in this application. We want a centered zipper, and we don't want it really obvious. Okay, so I've kind of pinned like I do with anything. I've pinned down at the bottom of where my zipper is. I can feel it under the seam. I've pinned at the top, and I've pinned in the middle. I'll show you how this looks from the back. See, I've got that pinned through all layers, right? And then I can even test it by opening it and seeing if the zipper slides. This is like the big reveal. If it gets stuck on something, it's because you've pinned it, you know, in place. The zipper's not going to open if you sew it in. But the idea is that if you set this up really nicely, when you're sort of prepping it, when you sew it in place, it'll come out exactly like this, okay? So I've got it pinned, and I could sew it like this with the pins in there, but honestly, especially when you're starting, it's really hard to sew with those pins in the way. Because I've pinned in this direction, which would be the same direction I'm sewing, it's going to be really hard to move them out of the way and keep it really nice and neat. So what I suggest is to hand baste it in. It only takes a few minutes, and it's totally worth the extra effort. So I've got a hand sewing needle prepped just with one single thread. You can do double, but you don't have to at all. This is going to be a stitch that you pull out immediately after you sew on the machine. So it is a true basting stitch. It's a temporary stitch. It doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be nice, just has to hold the zipper in place. So I might start, see, I can see where the zipper tape's ending. I might start, you know, from down here and do a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch baste. You could do wider, you could do like a big fat inch, but the idea of this is that we really want it to hold down as well as the pins are holding down. So if you make it a smaller basting stitch, that's a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, it's going to do the job. And so I'm just sewing exactly where I've pinned. Again, it doesn't even have to be super straight. Just want to make sure I don't get any knots in there. I am just sewing a rough basting stitch that's gonna, whoops, caught a pin, that's going to hold this in place so that I can remove these pins that will get in my way as I sew. I can pull that out because it's getting caught, but you can see as I remove the pins, oops, what's kind of happening. I mean, look, this isn't neat, it isn't straight, it doesn't have to be. I'll never see this, no one will ever see this because you'll remove it as soon as you're done. But that's the point of the basting stitch, is that it can work for you so you don't have to use pins. On something like delicate fabrics, you might do a basting stitch instead of pinning it, because maybe putting a pin in the fabric isn't going to work, it's going to mess it up. And I go all the way to the top because, again, you want it to be held down all the way. Just put that there for a second. But see, I can pull the pins out on this side, and you can see I've just got a loose basting stitch that's doing the same job that the pins were doing. My zipper is in there. I mean, technically I've sewn this zipper in. It's just obviously this is not a very good stitch, and that'll come right out. So I can trim this about 2 inches from the top, and I can do the other side again, starting from the bottom, and I leave like a 1 or 2 inch tail just so it doesn't come right out. And see, it's really only taking me a few minutes to do this, especially because I don't have to focus on neatness, but I promise you it's worth it. If you are struggling with your zipper, which you will, by the way, zippers are hard for everybody, and I don't look forward to it either. Every time I do one, I'm like, I hope this works. It's hard for everyone. So the more prep work you can do to make your life easier, you'll thank yourself. You just won't struggle as much. So if you are struggling and it looks terrible, I'm gonna ask, did you baste it in? Did you get it all prepped and ready before you tried to just sew it? Because if you didn't, well, that might be why you're having a problem. Okay. So I can pull those pins out, clip my basting stitch, get that out of the way, pull out these pins. Okay, so again, now I've got my zipper hand basted in. Technically, I've sewn in the zipper. So now let's do a nice pretty top stitch in a centered zipper application that's going to look nice. And you can see what's happening even the way I've kind of sewn this. This is an indication of what's going to happen when you sew it for real. My zipper pull does have a tendency to try to like pop out of that seam. I try to make sure it kisses and hide it, but that's, you know, it's a big fat thing, so it might try to pop out. But the key is to double check at this step that this is looking nice and flat and smooth like you want it to, okay? Because this is all the prep work. Now if I go to the machine and sew this in, it should look, you know, pretty much the same as it does right now. So I can come back up to my sewing machine, and now I'm ready to sew in. So now is when I can get rid of this regular foot and put in my zipper foot. Goes in just the same, and this one kind of gives me two side choices of how I'm going to sew. So I think what I'll do in this situation is I'll sew. I'm gonna stop and turn and sew this way, stop and turn, and then sew this way, all in one fell swoop, okay? So what I wanna do is start with my zipper foot on this side so that basically I can get my stitch very close to these zipper teeth. Oh, actually, I think I've done that wrong. I want to go this way. And you can test this. Move it as you need to, but see, and what I can do to start, I'm going to have to open that zipper up also to start so that I can get very close. But see, now I can get this very, very close to the edge without hitting these bumpy teeth that are going to try to knock my regular presser foot out of the way. If I was sewing over the zipper teeth, it would just be a little cumbersome. This would try to like jiggle on it a little bit. The zipper foot allows it not to do that, allows it to get really close. My goal is to still sew at about 1/4 inch from this edge. So I can still try to line this up with the edge of my presser foot, which is still the same as this one. It'll still give you right where that center is, about 1/4 inch over, okay? So that's where I'm placing this. And I'm doing the same thing as I normally would, placing it about 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch from the edge, holding on to my threads at first. This is definitely a seam that, you know, wants to bunch up with threads, so that way I've got it started. I've walked the first few stitches, and then I can go ahead and sew the rest. And again, I'm going to come down 1/4 inch from the edge all the way. I'm going to get to about halfway, and then I'm going to zip this back closed. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'll go ahead and sew with my foot pedal. Really taking my time. This is something that don't feel bad if you have to hand walk the entire seam. Really taking your time. So I'm coming down about halfway through the zipper, making sure my needle is down. I'm going to turn this off just so you can really see. Needle's down. And now I can pick my presser foot back up, and I can close this. There we go. You just gotta kind of shimmy it right under. So now it'll be easier for me to get past. I don't have to worry about sewing past a big fat zipper pull. So I can put that right back down and continue my seam 1/4 inch from this edge. Really nice and slow and steady. And my goal is to sew a little bit under, let me turn this off so I can make sure you can see, where I stopped, okay? But also remember not hitting my zipper stop. I can feel it. It's a big metal staple. I can feel it right here, okay? So if you can see, here's where the zipper stop is, and here's where my seam stopped, okay? So I've got a little bit of space. I've got maybe 1/4 of an inch between those two. My goal is to sew right across where I stopped sewing before, okay? So I can even leave that pin there for a second so that I can really see that. And then definitely making sure I'm not accidentally sewing over that zipper stop, which would try to break my needle, okay? So I'm going to continue, and again, I can even hand walk this because at this point, that's what I'm gonna have to do. So I get to where I have stopped sewing, where I've marked with my pin. My needle is down. Pull that pin out of the way. And then I can pick my presser foot up and I turn my fabric 90 degrees. So I can now sew exactly across in this direction. And I'm gonna sew a few stitches by hand walking it until my goal is that I would have the needle down, pick the presser foot up, and I would now sew this side at 1/4 inch from the edge. So I can check. It looks like maybe I need to go one more stitch over. So I'll pick that right back up. Again, presser foot down, I'll sew one more stitch. There we go. Needle is down, presser foot can come up, and you can turn your fabric, okay? So now I'm gonna come back up this side. You can see I've sewn right on top of my basting stitch, so it looks a little crazy right now because there's like 2 sets of stitches. And then I've turned and I've come over and I'm gonna do it in one fell swoop. Okay, so presser foot's down, needle is down. I can go ahead and sew this side. And again, I'm gonna come to about halfway, needle goes down, presser foot up, because I've kind of got to get this guy out of the way again. Okay, so I just shimmy that through, put that presser foot back down, needle is still down, and I can sew the rest of the seam. Go ahead and sew right off the edge. Finish, presser foot up, clip the edges. Okay. And the big moment of reveal is that I haven't accidentally sewn it to where it doesn't close, which it looks like it does. I've got this in there, but let me go ahead so that we can really see it, right? Because it looks a little crazy right now, and pull out my basting stitch, which unless I've sewn over it, should just come right out. Looks like I did probably sew over it at one point, but I can pull from both sides and see if I can get it. There we go. So I've pulled out that basting stitch, and you can see where I've sewn this about 1/4 inch from the edge, straight down. Okay, so let's pull my basting stitch out on this side. There we go. That came out in one fell swoop. And I'm just gonna trim my edges there. But there we go. I've got my zipper set, and the idea is that it's centered. So it's kissing almost, but definitely looks like it moved a little bit more than I would like. Let me see if I could go over to the iron and press this into the way that I would like it to look. Press that a little bit flatter. I might get lucky. I often try to fix things with the iron. I don't know that it's kissing. It's not kissing as much as I would like. I'll go ahead and make sure I get it as flat as I can. But I've got it near to kissing. See, I've got a little exposed teeth there. And I feel like, honestly, remember when I did that one extra stitch down here? Maybe I shouldn't have it. Looks like it's a little longer on this side. But this is similar to what yours should look like. And this is a centered zipper. where I've got, it's just like the little tiniest bit open. And here up at the top you can see it's kissing a little nicer, but there just becomes this little gap there. But fairly straight. I've got some wonkiness. And then down here again it goes over a little far on that side and comes up. But not terribly bad. Again, even every time I do a zipper, I'm like, oh, is it going to go in just the way I want? Usually though, doing that prep work, setting it up really nicely in the beginning helps you to make sure it doesn't move on you. And you could always sew a tighter basting stitch than I did. Sew it closer to the edge so that didn't end up moving. It looks like that's this one you can kind of see from the back. It jumped out a little bit right there, whereas this side stays really close to the teeth and looks really good. So this was the first one I did. So yeah, not really sure what happened there, but not terribly bad. This is the idea, okay? You can watch the other video that I posted, see, you know, best practices and how to do it. But the big thing is that it opens nice and neat. It looks nice and neat and straight, that this is really smooth. You don't have anything opening down here. I've sewn below where my zipper stops. You could go a little bit lower than that. You could even go below the zipper stop, but this way we just clear it entirely. Okay, so this is our zipper, centered zipper sample.